Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 7th webinar session for Research Skills for Library Liaison. My name is Lynette Woe, and I'm from Griffith University, and I shall be the moderator for today. I also have Sue Hickson with me, also from Griffith University, and the convener of the Library and Information Services Working Party to help facilitate today's session. Before we get started, just going to run through some webinar rules. Just a reminder, the session is being recorded. Please do turn off your videos as it does slow down the system. If you'd like to ask a question at the end of the session, if you'd like to raise your hand, I can unmute you, or if you'd like to use the chat box on the left-hand side, you can do so. And just to make sure, remember to keep everything professional because it is being recorded. Also, just a refresher for the collaboration tools. On the left, you'll notice under your name there are some smiley faces and ticks. Just to check that you guys can all hear me, can you just give me a tick or a smiley face? Great. I think I've got a few ticks here and some smiley face. Thank you. And again, down the bottom is the chat, so please feel free to chat to ask questions. I'll now hand it over to Sue to introduce our speakers for today.
Hi everyone, and thank you for attending. We have a change of speaker for today's session. So instead of Helen, who's unwell, we have Faye Yu and Sarah Evans, both from UQ. I should give you the title of the workshop today is Citation, Metrics and Research Impact. Faye is currently Senior Librarian, Research Outputs, and has been at UQ for 20 years, liaising with the academic community across a wide variety of disciplines. She's particularly passionate about research data management and recently celebrated the 100th dataset deposit in UQ eSpace. Her hobbies include tending her mediocre collection of succulents and bushwalking. Sarah is a librarian in the Research Output team, whose role involves providing metrics support to academics and generating organisational level metrics reports. Prior to joining the team 18 months ago, she was a research support librarian for the Faculty of Arts. She's on a quest to make the perfect chocolate chip cookie. Sounds delicious. Over to you, ladies.
Hello, can you hear me? This is Sarah.
We can.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for the nice introduction. I've got Faye here in the same room as me. She'll hop on the microphone as soon as my slides are over. So my name is Sarah Evans, and I'm here to talk to you basically explain what metrics are all about and to introduce the main tools used, or at least the tools we use at UQ. Okay, so just putting things in context. With metrics, there's an increasing awareness of the need to use relevant metrics to support claims of research excellence and to use metrics in helping differentiate researchers from one another for research grant applications and promotion rounds. Metrics, basic definition of metrics, they are things that can be counted. We're talking about the number of publications and citation counts. You can also look at journal quality measures like the journal impact factor. You can look at the H-index, and you can look at collaboration metrics. But whenever you're considering metrics, you must always look at the context. There are significant disciplinary differences, and there are some really big differences over time, so it can be very difficult to compare researchers. Okay, with metrics, we have what we call the standard 5, the number of publications, the number of citations, as in a career citation count overall, citations per paper, percentage not cited, and the H-index. So I've got a description of what they all mean, but ultimately they do say something, but there's plenty of information missing. Okay, metrics, we use them because they provide supporting evidence of claims that individuals or research groups make about their track record, about the significance of their contribution to their discipline, their international profile, and their capacity to collaborate effectively. In the current environment, research evaluation evaluation plays a very strong part in a researcher's day-to-day existence. ERA, the ARC and NHMRC grants, promotions and potential employers may expect to see metrics. It's sort of like, I guess, for a librarian, if we go to apply for a job somewhere and we have to respond to selection criteria, we can't just say, I'm a wonderful communicator, we must give examples. Metrics are pretty much the same thing. So an academic can't just say, I'm a wonderful researcher, I've been researching for 30 years. They need to have evidence to back up their claims. They can't just rely on being a wonderful researcher to get them through. Okay, research quality is essentially determined by two main methods. There's peer review, which is very popular in humanities for good reason, and/or citation counts, which is inferred by numbers. It's traditionally quite heavily used in the sciences. Citation counts. High citations equals high quality. There have been studies done correlating high quality with a high number of citation counts. So it's fairly well accepted that the greater the number of citations an article has, the higher quality it is likely to be. But it is not everything. Okay, when we're looking at citation counts, there are three main tools we use. There's Web of Science, which is very reliable because it's a subscription product, but it's not that great for some disciplines. It doesn't index everything. There is Scopus, which is also very reliable, but it's also not good for some disciplines. Google Scholar isn't quite as reliable as the two subscription products, but it does have very good coverage for most disciplines. With Web of Science, there's a program called Insights, and it can be used for benchmarking. It operates off Web of Science data. Similarly, with Scopus, there's a product called SCIVAL, which also benchmarks, but it operates on Scopus data. There is a program called Publish or Perish, which is not a benchmarking tool, but it can be used for analysis of Google Scholar citation counts. I'll just elaborate on some of these. Okay, citation counts. I've got part of a table here. Web of Science is a Thomson Reuters product. It has over 12,000 journals and over 60,000 books. Elsevier owns Scopus. You can see they index more journals and more books. And Google Scholar, well, it indexes most things, pretty much anything it can find. These figures were current a couple of months ago, but having recently been to presentations by Thomson Reuters and Elsevier, I'm pretty certain those numbers will increase substantially by the end of the year. Both of them are very keen to increase the amount of indexing of books that they have. Okay, this is just a typical Web of Science record, which I'm assuming many people will be familiar with. Underlined in red are basically all the fields we can mine for data, fields that we can mine for information. So it's a fairly rich source of information when we're looking at metrics. That's the second half of the record. Okay, this is the way I like to summarize the citation tools. We've got a Thomson Reuters column, an Elsevier column, and the other column. So if you're looking for citation counts, you can go to Web of Science, Scopus, or Google Scholar. If you're looking to benchmark performance, you can use Insights, Essential Science Indicators, there's SCIVAL, and then essentially there's Publish or Perish, which will do some analysis. If you're looking at journal quality, what quality is the journal that your academics are publishing in? They might ask you what quality, what is a top quality journal in my field, that type of thing. You can go to Journal Citation Reports, which is a Thomson Reuters product, or you can go to SciMago, which is an Elsevier product. Journal Citation Reports, JCR, is a subscription-based product, whereas SciMago is free. You can Google it, find it very easily, and it has Elsevier's ranking of journals. Author identifiers, I understand, will be covered in a separate webinar, but essentially Researcher ID matches up with Thomson Reuters products, and Scopus ID is an Elsevier product. There is also ORCID and Google Scholar Profile, which I think we'll learn about next week. Okay, so when it comes to benchmarking, working out how good an academic's performance is, or a particular article's performance is, or even the university's performance, we can go to Insights, Essential Science Indicators, or SCIVAL. We can benchmark at an article level or a journal level. Okay, benchmarking and Insights. Insights introduced, well, there was Insights, old Insights, and there's Insights version 2. Version 2 is the one that most people are currently using. Now, it uses Web of Science data. It trawls that data to come up with benchmarks. It indexes things from 1980 onwards, which is very good coverage. It is updated every 2 months. You can get benchmark within a discipline, within Australia, within the world, among the GO8. You can set different types of groups to compare against. Like Web of Science, it does not unify author names. There is an Insights profile module, but it hasn't been finalized yet. So if you're looking for G. Smith, you're going to have a terrible time trying to find him without a researcher ID. So it can be a little bit frustrating to find specific authors if they don't have a neat and tidy researcher ID, or if they don't have a very unique name that they're consistently publishing with. The old Insights does unify author names, but it's quite old, so I won't talk about that. Insights is really best for benchmarking with researchers who have a researcher ID so that we can find them very easily. Their data is very clean, it's very tidy, so we can produce accurate figures with. It's great for benchmarking at FOR code level, whether it's 2-digit or 4-digit, and it can be quite handy in benchmarking against Web of Science categories. Okay, I'll talk just a little bit about benchmarking of individual articles on Web of Science. I understand not everyone will have a subscription to Insights, so I can show you a couple of things that you can actually do with Web of Science, which I'm assuming most people will have heard of or will actually have access to. Now, in this example, I pulled up an article co-authored by a UQ academic. What I've done is a search for the journal that this article was published in, the Journal of Environmental Management. This article was published in 2009. So I'm going to run my search just on a journal title and the year. So basically I'm looking for this article amongst all the works published in that journal in that year to see exactly where it sits. So when I run that search, oops, some of my images haven't come up. Gosh, that's no good. I'm sorry about that. That's quite unfortunate. Well, anyway, it's one of 491 publications in that journal in that year. Now, if I sort them by time cited, highest to lowest, and I look down that list, this particular article is the 23rd most highly cited item of the 491 publications in that journal in that year. So if a researcher is, say, applying for a grant through the ARC or NHMRC, and they need to justify why one particular article is one of their top 10 career best publications, it would be a very reasonable thing for them to say this publication is in the top 5% of most highly cited in the Journal of Environmental Management in 2009. So it's a fair thing to say. We can find it in Web of Science. We look at where it sits in that journal in that year. We look at the citation counts, see where it ranks, convert it to a percentage, and then we can absolutely make that statement against that particular publication. Okay, moving on to SCIVAL. SCIVAL is a benchmarking database and it uses Scopus data. It's really good for comparing individuals, groups, and universities. There are some obstacles though. You do need to have a unified name. So if you're a researcher and you have a very untidy Scopus ID, it's going to be very difficult to benchmark your output against anyone else's. So essentially you need to have a clean and tidy Scopus ID to be found in that database. To use SCIVAL, you do need to create an Elsevier login, which isn't a problem. And some of the benchmarking fields aren't very well defined, at least from our perspective. Okay, in the overview module, I've actually run a search on a researcher at the University of Queensland. I'm analysing her output and I've looked at the journal categories that she's publishing in. So you can see that she's got well over 25, possibly 27 publications that fall into the social sciences field. That's a journal category. And if we look at the field-weighted citation impact, it's maybe 2.6, 2.7. So essentially her publications in social sciences are doing very well. 1 is considered world average, so anything above 1 is above average. If I click to the benchmarking tab in SCIVAL, I can actually do some more benchmarking. I can look back a few more than 5 years. I can look at different researchers. I can look at a university. So in this example, I've picked on 2 researchers. I've found their names. I've picked out a university, and I've looked at how much output they have that is indexed in Scopus, what the field-weighted citation impact is for all of their works, and whether, well, how much of their output is in the top 10% of Australia. Okay, Essential Science Indicators, you may have heard of it if not used it. It is a Thomson Reuters product again, and it categorises papers into 22 different fields of research. It's not wonderful for arts and humanities, given it doesn't really index any of those things, but social sciences down in the bottom column here, it certainly does index a lot of articles there. Now, you might have heard these terms bandied about: highly cited paper, highly cited author, hot paper. They actually have very specific definitions. It's ESI terminology. So if someone has a highly cited paper, it means their paper, which can be an article or a review, ranks in the top 1% by citations for that field and that year. So it's doing incredibly well, that particular paper. To be a highly cited author, you must have a certain amount of highly cited papers in your field. Now, there are very different thresholds. They vary from discipline to discipline. There is an author list of highly cited authors on highlycited.com. The 2015 list was only released today, I think. And these highly cited authors are certainly used when they come to calculate the academic ranking of world universities. Hot papers you might not hear quite so commonly, but they fall into the top 0.1% by citations for their field and for their age. So I've got a screenshot I've taken from Web of Science there for hot paper and highly cited paper. If you see those symbols on a record, that's what it means. If you're looking for these things specifically, you run your search in Web of Science, and if you have a look down the left-hand column where the refinements are, there'll be an ESI top papers refinement option. If you click on it, you can actually see how many hot papers and how many highly cited papers are in the list of the search that you've run, and you can pull them out and see exactly what they are, which can be fantastic if you're looking at an institution level or a department level, even an individual level. Publish or Perish, it's basically a free web program. It will retrieve and analyze academic citations using Google Scholar data. It presents outputs quickly. It can compute citation stats. It is very uneven in its coverage of disciplines. It is not good for non-English language publications, but it can tidy name variants. Does not do any benchmarking, so in that sense we don't tend to pay a huge amount of attention to it. It can include, of course, non-scholarly citations from blogs, from wikis, from grey literature, and it does actually function better in PC than Mac. So if you were to just Google it, you can download it onto your desktop quite quickly, quite easily, and you can actually do some analysis of papers that way. Okay, journal quality. When we talk about journal quality, we're looking at journal citation reports or SCIVAL to see where journals people are publishing in have ranked. So journal citation reports is the more commonly used of the two, but SCIVAL is certainly still valid. If someone wanted to look at the quality of journals they're publishing in, they can go to SCIVAL and look up which tiers and which subject fields those journals have been put into. Journal impact factors are flawed for several reasons, but they still can be useful to profile your research output. So here's the definition of what a journal impact factor is. It's a very straightforward formula. It's looking back, it's not looking forward. Okay, so when you're in Journal Citation Reports, the subscription database that's part of the Thomson Reuters family, you can have a look. In the field of criminology and penology, the highest impact factor of a journal in that field is only 3.06. So it does seem quite low. Now, if I look at law, you can see the top impact factor there is 6.57. If we go over to history, it's only 1.293. So you can see how it could be quite unfair if you were to write in a grant application, I publish in journals with an impact factor of an average of 5. Now, in some fields where impact factors are very high, 30 or 40, it might look like you're publishing in very weak journals, but in your particular discipline, 5 could be incredibly good. So you can see why there are some problems associated with the use of journal impact factors. Okay, the H-index, you've probably heard of the H-index. It was proposed by Hirsch in 2005 as a measure of research influence of a scientist. Bear in mind that Hirsch was a physicist, and he had in mind scientists when he designed this ranking. So essentially, if your H-index is 15, it means you have 15 papers that have been cited 15 times or more. Does it mean anything? Yes and no. You must use it with care. Be very careful. Citation patterns do vary across disciplines. A H-index in medicine is much, much higher than a H-index in mathematics. You can't compare different researchers with a H-index. Some will be at completely different stages of their career. And you should never use a H-index in isolation. It's just one of many things you can use to talk about research quality. Okay, here's just a quick example of 3 different researchers. You can see they all have a H-index of 5, but they've all achieved it essentially a different way. They all have 5 papers with 5 citations or more. So their average citations are very different, but their H-index is exactly the same. So it sort of proves that there is really only one thing a H-index can tell you. It can't tell you everything. So to put things in context, if you want to help someone present their H-index in a grant application, you should explain it. My H-index based on these papers is 10. I have 4 papers with this many citations and 1 with this many. You need to explain it, put it into context, look at the date you're grabbing the data from, and make sure you source the data that you are actually using. A number by itself is quite meaningless without some explanatory information around it. Okay, some basic advice. Always take care how metrics are presented. Be very specific, be very descriptive. You can't just say general things like most of my articles are. It's much better to be specific, to say 8 out of 10 or 80% of my work, etc., etc. Always provide the date you took metrics counts on and the source. Taking a screenshot or a screen dump is particularly useful, and context is all important. So when presenting metrics, presenting information that supports your statement that you're a quality researcher, you must always use a range of metrics, whatever is appropriate for your discipline and your history. If metrics can't be used to make you look good, don't use them. It's as simple as that. I'm now going to hand over to Faye, who will just take the headphones from me and continue.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. So, Sarah has been talking about metrics and the relevant tools we use here at UQ and what they can provide, etc. I'm going to move away from all of that. Basically, I'm going to talk about the principles and the best practice of how to use those metrics information wisely, and based on those principles, the services UQ Library offer to the research community. So I'm going to quote actually a paragraph written in Leighton Manifesto. I'm going to touch upon that a little bit later, just in a minute. It says, data are increasingly used to govern science. Research evaluations that were once bespoke and performed by peers are now routine and reliant on metrics. The problem is that evaluation is now led by the data rather than by judgment. I would say by evidence-based judgment. Metrics have proliferated, usually well-intentioned, not always well-informed, often ill-applied. We risk damaging the system with the very tools designed to improve it. As evaluation is increasingly implemented by organizations without knowledge of or advice on good practice and interpretation. So, to deal with the issues around using metrics wisely, there is a in 2012, a group of editors and publishers of scholarly journals convened for the annual meeting of the American Society for Cell Biology in San Francisco. And they developed this set of guidelines, and it's called the San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment, in short, DORA. And there is a link there you can click on to get to the full text. So in DORA, it intends to hold the practice of correlating the journal impact factor to the merits of a specific scientist's contributions. So you can see this document or guideline is deal with basically journal impact factors, how to use it wisely, not to rely on it too much to judge a scientist's contribution. And again, there are links down there you can click on to get to the document. And interestingly, this picture, this graph actually used in, again, Leiden Manifesto, which I'm going to mention in a minute. And they shows impact factor obsession. So people obsessed. But after the DORA, you can see a sharp drop. And the most people who most obsessed with are basically editors, journal editors. Of course, they really care about their impact factors, and they do all sorts of things to get a good impact factor for their journal. Okay, so that was 2012. Now in 2014, again, a panel session at the 19th International Conference on Science and Technology Indicators, including the idea that bibliometrics community develop a manifesto. So this is called, referred to by a lot of people, Leiden Manifesto. I think quite a few big publishers also refer to this. Nature, Science, Thomson, Reuters, Elsevier, they all sort of referred to this and made comments about that. 10 principles illustrated in this Leiden Manifesto. I think they're quite self-explanatory, so I won't go through them, and you can view the slides and also, again, the hyperlink there to get to the full text. Now, in 2013, there is a conference called International Society for Scientoinformatics, Scientometrics and Informatics. Sorry, and in short, it's called ISSI. And there is a plenary session, and the presenter mentioned about 10 do's and 10 don'ts. So that's the next slide all about. Don't reduce individual performance to a single number. So that's explanatory. I think everyone agrees with that. Don't use impact factors as measures of quality. I think Sarah already pointed out the flaws on that. Don't apply hidden bibliometric filters for selection. So I guess some people, when they get the bibliometrics, they try to adjust to suit the situation they are in, and they just selectively get some metrics. That's what it meant. Even if you need to use filters, you have to clearly say it, what sort of filters you used. Don't apply arbitrary weights to co-authors. So arbitrary weights meaning, like when people think about co-authors, like first author, last author, who contributes most, etc. Don't just make arbitrary comments, say first author made the most contribution. Maybe in a lot of cases it is true, but discipline it varies from discipline to discipline. So you don't just make arbitrary weights. You have to have some evidence. For example, in medical or health, who's usually contributes most, or they just equally distribute the weights, etc. Don't rank scientists according to one indicator. That's obvious. Don't merge incommensurable measures. Well, for this one, it's just according to, I mean, you can't combine the measures which based on different standards. I think the obvious example I can think of is the hybrid H-index. Because H-index is so easy to calculate, sometimes people just add it all up, like a H-index from Web of Science, H-index from Google, and H-index from Google Scholar. They just add it all up and make their own sort of thing, you know, without saying it. It just say my H is 10 or 20, etc. So don't do that. Don't use flawed statistics, obvious. Don't blindly trust one-hit wonders. I think probably someone published one article in Nature. Some people, it just shows, probably just show off like, oh, I got a paper in Nature. But you have to dig deep. Like, are you one of the 1,000 authors in that article, or are you, you know, did you make the most contribution, or you just a statistician, you know, do the calculations? I'm not downplaying the statistician, but I'm just saying you need to get the full story behind it. Don't compare apples and oranges, that's obvious. Don't allow deadlines and workload to compel you, blah, blah, blah. So these 10 don'ts obviously apply to researchers, but librarians need to know as well so that we can, you know, mention it to researchers. 10 things you might do. Also, individual level bibliometrics is statistics. This means whenever something to do with the statistics, you have to have large enough samples. You can't just based on your sort of data, you know, just a few publications, for example, or a few researchers. It has to be significantly large. Analyze collaboration profiles of researchers. Okay, so collaboration profiles meaning like in what kind of a situation does research tend to collaborate, or is a particular researcher a loner, or he likes to work with certain group of people, etc., etc., or internationally or nationally. So all these things probably need to consider. Always combine quantitative and qualitative methods. That's obvious. Use citation context analysis. Citation context here, it means you probably not just refer to, but also like your article is not just referred to. Sometimes you will see in the reference list, you just one article just mentioned, but in the whole article, probably there is only one sentence mentioned this, and it's not really important or even relevant to the whole topic of the research. So citation context means it's really, you should look at whether the article is really used and discussed, whether negatively or positively, doesn't matter, by your research colleagues, etc. So really your publication meant something, not just briefly mentioned for something else. Analyze subject profiles. I guess that's easy. Make an explicit choice for user or time window analysis. Basically, so if you have to explicitly say you use journal articles and reviews in your analysis, or for your data, the publication body, or you include everything else, editorial, letters to the editor, etc. Time window just means, you know, 2012 to 2014 or all years, etc. Combine bibliometrics with the career analysis. I think Sarah's already illustrated on that. Some people have career breaks and because of all sorts of reasons, and you need to take that into consideration. Clean bibliographic data carefully and use external sources, so CVs and any other. So you have to have a clean data, complete collection of your publication, of the publications. Even some don'ts are not taboo if properly applied. Well, help users to interpret and apply your results. Okay. So guidelines, however, guidelines are symbolic, not regulatory. I guess it's just a basic understanding and the philosophy of how to use metrics. So based on that, we translate these principles into a service at the UQ library. We have a mature metric service which is in operation for almost 5 years now. What we do, this is our statement, aims to provide advice and practical assistance. So we work organizational units and individuals when they are doing like school reviews or grant applications or promotion or job application, etc. Or simply someone is going to talk to overseas visitors. And we don't actually write actual paragraphs, for example, regarding metrics, giving people the wordings. We just provide information and interpretation and explanation of the information we got from the benchmarking databases or the databases like a Web of Science. So I think that's quite clear. The scope of service, I've already touched upon a bit. We don't really, when we help individual academics, we provide advice, we provide interpretation of the data, and we provide context. We basically we ask them questions to see, to make them be aware that these are the issues they need to deal with. These are the sort of things they need to take into consideration to craft their stories. So we basically provide advice rather than giving them the words. And for school managers and heads of the organizational units, the same thing. We produce the reports. The reports is not the actual reports they're going to use. They are basically the information and interpretation and explanation of the information and all the limitations and the caveats. We make sure we really explicitly state those limitations and the caveats they need to be aware. They can't just use it and plug it somewhere in their report. Same with the senior execs, including Office of Research and UQ International Office. Same thing, we produce and we work with them very closely, and basically if they have any requests regarding any metrics information, they just contact us anytime basically. So this is our service model. For individual researchers at UQ, we have within the library, we have a specialist in scholarly communication and digitization service. Sarah and I are in that section, so we're kind of a specialist or experts. And then we train some client services librarians to be kind of an expert in certain areas in providing metric service. And then the other, all client services librarians and the managers, they just have a basic awareness. So they can refer, when they get queries regarding metrics, they know who to refer to. I think that's what some observations and experience in these 4 years of providing this kind of a service. Publication data is part of a big picture. So we kind of, stress it again and again and again. You need to put everything in context. Data integrity and completeness of the publication collection is vital. So you need to get, if some researchers wanting help from you, first of all, we always ask author ID if they have established author identification, and so that we can search them and accurately pull out their publications, or we ask for CV, etc. Engagement with the individual is imperative, yes. So we need to ask the researchers all the time, to check with them about the data. Providing context for publication data and metrics information is critical. So context, context, context. Sophisticated metrics tools answer many questions, but often not the question you are asking. We're getting into philosophical thinking now. Okay, best practice. meaningful metrics. So I guess this message is right through all these slides. A few alt metrics. I think probably everyone knows pretty much about alt metrics, I hope. Basically, they're looking beyond publications. So we're looking at the blogs, the tweets, and Facebook likes, things like that. In fact, in this handbook, the London School of Economics published a handbook. In that handbook, they list 56 indicators of impact. Basically, they get a group of people in the room and just asking them, jot down anything you think that can have impact, research impact or whatever. So they listed all of that. So basically, it's showing there are other things you need to consider apart from bibliometrics or publications. Okay, beyond citation analysis, where to look for, when, and how. So again, the message is the same. Instrumental, so I'm not going to repeat that. I think we're kind of reaching, that's the next steps. I think that's the last slide. Again, it is from the Leighton Manifesto. So with that, I think we're going to conclude our presentation. Thank you very much. If you want to still reading that next steps.
Thanks, Faye. I have a few questions here that some have asked for Sarah. So if you want to swap back with Sarah for a bit.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you.
Hello, Sarah.
Hi, Sarah. I'm just going to read out a couple of questions. I've got one here from Maureen. Does POP have an issue with duplication? And brackets GES has this problem?
Yes, it does. It does, because it draws directly from Google Scholar. It's got exactly the same problems that Google Scholar has. If you put in, say, an academic's name in Publish or Perish, you'll come up with a list of everyone with that name and all the publications that it can find. You can actually merge those records if you like. You can tick the box and say, yes, this is the research I'm looking for, ignore the boxes against the ones that's not, and you can actually combine them. So to a certain extent you can weed, but it's not a perfect art, let's just say.
Right, and I have another one from Jackie. Why do you say POP is not good for non-English language publications?
It doesn't trawl everything. It's based on Google. Google captures a lot, but it doesn't capture everything. It can be difficult to find all publications in non-English language. That's said, I think it probably does a better job than Web of Science or Scopus does at indexing publications that are not in English.
Great. Any other questions? Does anyone have any questions for Faye or Sarah? Please feel free to use the chat or let me know, put your hand up and I can unmute you and you can use your microphone. A few people typing. There's a thing. Let me scroll through my chat. Yes, Maureen has a question. I'll unmute you, Maureen, if you want to use your microphone. Okay, you should be able to use your phone microphone now, Maureen. Yep, she's chatting, and I've got a few other people chatting, so just bear with us, Sarah and Faye.
Yep. Faye and I are sharing a set of headphones, so if it's for Faye, I'll just hand it over.
No worries, we'll just wait for a bit for people to type. If you do have a mic, guys, happy for you to use your microphone because it might be faster than typing. Okay, I've got one from Jody. What do you tend to use at UQ to indicate research impact? And does it depend on, whoops, does it
depend on metric, discipline? Yes, it does depend on the discipline. If we're looking at the arts and humanities, we get a very different picture from Web of Science and Scopus than we do for the sciences or engineering. It really depends on the discipline. It can also depend on the stage of the researcher. If it's an early career researcher, they might not have many publications to do, group metrics on. If it is someone who, like I say, is an early career researcher and doesn't have many publications, we would encourage them to unpack the citations that they do have. So they might have 3 or 4 citations on a couple of papers that they've written. We would encourage them to have a look at who is citing them. Where did they come from? Are they prestigious? Are they fantastic sites? Have they influenced the work of the person citing them? That type of thing. We use anything that makes a researcher look good, to be perfectly honest. Essentially, if a researcher needs assistance with compiling metrics for a promotion or for a grant application, we ask them if they've got a tidy author ID. We have a look in all of the different products to see where they look the best. And we say, well, this is how you look in Web of Science, this is how you look in Scopus. We can present them with the data. What they do with it is essentially up to them, but we do encourage them to make note of exactly where the data is coming from, what date it was compiled on. So there are many different things. Definitely Web of Science, definitely Scopus. We certainly do look at Google Scholar for some disciplines.
Okay, and I've got another question here for Maureen. At UQ, when staff are going for research grants, does the university prefer a particular database for matrix?
No.
For example, SCIVAL or Insight? Yeah.
No, absolutely not. As long as you say where you're getting that information from, it makes no difference. If you blindly put data in, it's a little bit frustrating because no one can check it. They can't check the accuracy. They can't actually look at a breakdown. But no, some disciplines though, or some researchers in certain disciplines look a lot better in SCIVAL than they do in Insights, primarily because the journals that they're publishing in are actually indexed in Scopus. So if we had, say, a history researcher, 30% of their output might be published in Scopus index databases, and maybe 5% of their output is indexed in Web of Science databases. So no matter which database you go to, you're going to get a very incomplete picture of their overall output. In those sorts of cases where databases don't provide very good coverage for an academic's output, I wouldn't say I would discourage them from using it, but I would certainly encourage them to say that if they are going to use metrics, just to say that this only covers 20% of my output or 30% of my output. So you can't think that the metrics are the be-all and end-all when the vast majority of their publications are not indexed in the main 2 databases.
Thank you. I've got another question here from Jackie, and I believe this is for Faye. Do you have examples of how you use the alt matrix data, and have you used them for only qualitative statements, or have you used alt matrix in a quantitative way?
I think of both, because and you do need to mention their alt metrics, like where they're from, like it's how many tweets you've got and stuff like that. And we always say you can't claim that alt metrics shows the quality of research. It only shows the interest or general interest in the society or research community. Is that okay to answer the question?
Jackie's just typing, so hopefully yes, says yes. Great. Any other questions? I'll just have a scroll and see if anyone's typing. There's a few. While we're waiting for some questions, I've just popped in the link for the survey for today. If you could kindly fill that out, that would be great. Maureen's got another question. How do you gather matrix for researchers that do not publish in journals but have a lot of book publications?
How do we gather metrics with a lot of book publications? If we're talking about law, I'd be encouraging you to speak to a law librarian. I'm not personally familiar with law citations or law indexing. But someone with a lot of books, you can go to Google Scholar, have a look at how many books are indexed there. Hopefully it's all of them, and hopefully there is, you know, plenty of citations on them. I do think it's acceptable to use Google Scholar citation metrics. You can say, I've got these, you know, this is my best book publication. It's got, you know, 36 citations, in brackets put Google Scholar and the date. As long as you're saying where you get that information from, it is valid. It's unfortunate that Web of Science and Scopus don't index as many books as everyone would like them to. It's just the way it is. But I would still use Google Scholar citation metrics in the absence of other metrics being there. It's certainly the situation that I think a lot of academics find themselves in.
Thanks, Sarah. I think Ryan says thank you as well. Any other questions? I think we have a few more minutes for another one. I can see a few people chatting in the screen, so I'll just give them a minute to type.
I guess I could say something else about books, slightly going away from the databases. If a researcher has published many books or book chapters, they could have a look to see how much of their output has contributed towards the ERA rating that FOR code received at their university. So if there were, say, you know, 100 items put forward for evaluation for a particular FOR code, and that researcher, you know, 3 or 4 of their publications went towards that, they can say, well, 4 of my books contributed to the 5 that my discipline or this discipline scored at my institution. They could put it that way. Sorry, there's another question here. Is this the research?
I might just pick Jackie's one because it's still on the book one.
Yes.
Could you use the number of libraries holding a book as an indicator?
Yes, certainly we do. We have a look and see how many sales there. Well, actually, publishers can talk about sales. We can certainly search libraries. If you find a lot of the Ivy League in America, Oxbridge in the UK have certainly all published copies of that book, that's fantastic. Yeah, definitely the more the better. We can certainly say that, you know, 600 copies are held in libraries around the world. You might like to name drop certain countries if they're unusual or they're far-reaching or they've been translated into other languages. It's certainly something that could be looked at. There's a question about ResearchGate or academia.
Yeah. Jody has asked, do you use ResearchGate or academia.edu for metric data?
No, we don't go to ResearchGate, we don't go to academia, we don't actually encourage their use because they're essentially social media products. What we do have within eSpace, which is our institutional repository, we have an altmetric indicator. So a researcher can look up their works in the institutional repository and they can actually sort them by altmetrics. So they can see which articles or which publications are attracting the most mentions on social media. I don't think it trolls ResearchGate or academia. It can be those things I think are perfectly useful for academics to know who's following them, but we don't actually provide them support with any sort of support in using that.
Great, thank you for that, Sarah. I'm just doing a quick scan. I don't think anyone else is typing in. Might give a couple of minutes for, we're still under the time limit here, so just maybe some final questions. No, just thank you. Thanks from Jody and Maureen. I might pass it back over to Sue to close today's session.
Okay, thank you to Sarah and Faye. That was really interesting, very timely as far as I'm concerned for Griffith, so thank you very much. Can we just have a little a clap or an applause or a smiley face or something for our people today?
Thank you for having us, by the way. It was a nice unexpected start to the day to be told that we'd be stepping in for Helen and covering a presentation on metrics.
Yes, well, it's extremely well done at such short notice, so thank you very much. We do appreciate it. I'll just let everyone know that the next session is on the 16th of September. It's about online profiles, so tips for ORCID, Scopus, Researcher ID and Google Scholar, and that will be presented by our very own Jackie Wolstenholme from JCU and Paula Callan from QUT. So that's another one to look forward to next week. So thank you very much, everyone, and we'll see you all again next week.